Hello, welcome to part two of our conversation with Cal and Joe. My name is Cindy Brock, and I'm a literacy professor at the University of Wyoming, and I'm speaking with Cal and Joe, and they're each going to take a moment and introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about the work they do.
Do you want to go first, Joe?
Sure. So my name is Joe Asoff, and I teach 11th and 12th grade mathematics at Health Sciences High and Middle College over in the City Heights area of San Diego. And I work with Dr. Lapp, Dr. Fisher, and Dr. Fry over there, where we have a heavy focus on literacy, as well as some of the work that I'm doing this year and have been doing for the past couple of years is really starting to integrate the new Common Core state standards into our instruction, where we're changing our focus from just not just on content anymore, but also to thinking and process as well. So that's the majority of where my work is at this point.
Awesome. My name is Calvin Anderson. I'm a manager over at Space Exploration Technologies, also known as SpaceX. We design and manufacture and launch advanced rockets and spaceships. The company was founded in 2002 to revolutionize space technology with the ultimate goal of enabling people to live on other planets.
Thank you, Cal and Joe. Last time, in part one of our conversation, we talked a lot with Cal, and he helped us understand some of the work that he does and the kind of, we started talking a little bit with Joe about how Joe works to prepare the students that he teaches for positions like Cal's at SpaceX. So we'll take up with where we kind of ended off for part one. And Joe, would you do some talk? Well, maybe Cal, could you take a minute or two and remind us what are some of the key things you shared with us last time? And then Joe, would you be willing to talk a bit about what do you do to prepare your students for positions like Cal's?
Absolutely.
So we just explained who I am. Given the fact that SpaceX is considered underneath the international trafficking of arms regulation, I'm going to have to limit some of the level of detail of the things that I'm capable of speaking about. So please forgive those generalities. Basically, at SpaceX, we pride ourselves on picking the greatest talent throughout the nation. We have a measure, we say the top 3% of people that apply at SpaceX are the ones that usually get selected. Most of the time when we're looking for characteristics of quality candidates, we're looking for people that are capable of high-level thought, capable of reading and writing and communicating in that way, since that's kind of the largest media for communication throughout our business and many businesses. We also have some unique things within a manufacturing environment that kind of make us special. So the idea of taking a physical object or an idea of a physical object and translating that down on the paper, we call that like a print, or the closest equivalent would be when you build a house, you have a blueprint or a architectural print. And through the use of lines and dimensions and tolerances, we develop that idea. And then that print or blueprint is taken by another individual or group that is responsible for translating that into a physical object. And so there's an opportunity there for translation errors. So just because I have this idea, it doesn't necessarily mean that I am capable of translating that onto paper in the same way that I had imagined it. Just as the person that's reading the blueprint doesn't necessarily translate my idea perfectly as well. So there's a little bit of loss there. And we had an opportunity to speak a little bit about that last time. The other thing that makes our area kind of unique is that I need to be able to explain huge amounts of information with as little input as possible. So within our business, it's not uncommon to utilize specification documents which outline the details of specific concepts so that we don't have to rewrite those or re-explain those over and over again. The use of a specification document is frequently used to train personnel on the ways of doing things, acceptance criteria, procedures, best practices, things of that nature. And so it gives us the ability within a print to say, I would like you to drill this hole in accordance with specification 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ABC. And for that to be understood by the practitioner, and for him to go or her to go over and drill that hole in the same way that I intended them to do it. And then also there's the use of standardization. So specification gives us the ability to standardize the response to my command through the use of prints over and over and over again. And we don't end up having to retranslate and retranslate and retranslate. So we're looking for people that can do two things. We're looking for people that have the ability to create specifications in the form of a document or a blueprint. And we're looking for people that have the ability to understand that high-level jargon and symbolism and all of those things in order to actually create real product that fulfills the ideas and the imagination of the engineers at SpaceX.
Thank you. That's a beautiful kind of recap of some of the important things that we talked about last time, the important topics. Joe, now could you talk a bit about, so what kinds of things do you do when you work with your students to prepare them for the kind of work Cal was just talking about?
Yeah, sure. So I noted 4 major things that Cal talked about right there, and I'll just start going down the list. The first one, and this is kind of overarching to all of them the way I see it, is, Cal, you mentioned that you're really looking for people with capable of a high level of thinking. And I feel like what we're doing in the mathematics room is really about building that thinking, especially with, again, that focus now going to process rather than product. So it's not really about the right answer, because it's not like we're actually, you know, performing heart surgery or anything in there. I mean, there's a time for precision, but we're, as an educational environment, our focus is on the thinking. It's on the process. So we want to make sure that our students are understanding why they're doing what they're doing. And if they miss a negative sign here or there, that's not what's going to indicate that they're not building competency. Sure, it will on the procedural fluency side of things, and we do teach the mathematical practice that we need to be attending to precision with our computations. But the major focus really is on, do you understand what you're doing, and can you tell us why you're doing this particular approach or this particular procedure? So we feel that is really what's going to be building that high level of thinking, is that understanding. When they want to err away from a calculator because they'll go there just to get that. If you wanted a decimal approximation, that's fine, we can get you there. But let me show you why this rational or this irrational number is the perfect answer. Let me tell you why this is the pure answer as to conceptually what I'm actually figuring out here. So that would be the first major point that I noticed to get them to that high level of thinking.
Joe, that makes a whole lot of sense. That's exactly right. And a potential employee at any company is going to be more valuable when they have the ability to be dropped into any circumstance and solve their way out of there. There's no such thing as a degree for a SpaceX engineer. There's no such degree as a process development engineer or a designer or whatever.
Right.
Degree only tells the employer that they have the ability to learn what the company has to teach them.
Exactly.
Right? And so basically all of the education that they're going through, we hope that they walk away with a foundational element of understanding on the core concepts. Right? Because we all make computational mistakes, right? We all follow a set of instructions, but if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, right? If you don't know the ultimate benefit of what you're doing, then you won't be motivated to be able to solve problems for yourself. And so I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Very good. That's definitely validating for some of the work that we do, because it's for people who've been in math ed for a while, for a number of years. Sometimes it's tough to take that focus. Plus, a lot of us, went through math education in a similar way, where the focus was on, did you get the right answer, the one and only right answer? So it is nice to hear that that's what you're looking for, because that's definitely what we're pushing right now is working on developing the whole student and their thinking. The other part that I heard you talk about was about blueprints, about your print documents, changing that paper to reality. And the first thing that came to my mind is a student's, and this again goes to that first point, is a student's ability to reason abstractly and quantitatively. And
Yep.
that's one of our mathematical practices where I try to teach a lot about the structure, about, again, why you're doing it. And when we learn a new concept, quote unquote, I'll try to point out that they already know how to do this, they just don't realize it yet. And specifically when we talk about things like, for example, in the 11th grade room this year, we introduced radical numbers, things like square root of 2 and what happens when you have 3 square roots of 2 and you add that to 5 square roots of 2. And before we even began that conversation, I said, I'm going to prove to you today that you already know how to do this computation. You already know how to do this work. And I, of course, tied it back to their understanding of algebraic structures and that they've been adding variables for many, many years already. And this is the same exact type of thing. They're combining like terms. So that's one example of how I try to, because when you talk about the blueprints and you talk about the prints changing the paper to reality, I think you need to have some level of a capability to think abstractly and understand that this is literally a flat piece of paper with some markings on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that is. But what does it mean? What does it mean? How can I manifest this? How can this mean more than just what it is? That requires a certain level of abstraction, I believe. And that's
absolutely
something we're trying to build quite a bit in our students.
Abstraction and visualization, I think, are two key concepts that are very difficult for people to comprehend. And I can remember back to my early college days of design drafting theory. And one of the exercises that they have you do is look at an image and translate that image by copying it onto another sheet of paper by hand. And so that was kind of like the first phase. Second phase was taking a physical object and then translating that onto a piece of paper. And then the third phase was taking the piece of paper and then creating the physical object. Now, they were as simple as using Lego blocks in order to try and perform those exercises. I found it very interesting to see how different people struggled with the ability to translate back and forth between a paper representation of physical reality and physical reality back to paper. That's not necessarily a talent that everybody has, but I do find that the people that, given the correct environment and the correct stimulation, generally tend to be successful if they practice at it.
And I think that's key that you bring up the practice component, because I think that at least a lot of my educational experience when I was in school, some people were just born with certain gifts and others were not. And some of us are good at this and, I'm not a math person and I'm an art person or whatever it is. But, I think that the mold that we're trying to recreate and after breaking the old one is, everyone can learn. It's more of a growth mindset approach. Everyone can learn. And what if those people that you're describing that maybe hadn't really figured out how to go from the abstract to the concrete and vice versa, what if they had more meaningful experiences? So practicing, trying to build this growth mindset in our students, we want to focus on the fact that absolutely everyone can learn. And what if those students that weren't, or what if those people that you mentioned, Cal, who weren't having a great time with going from the abstract to the concrete and back again, what if they had opportunities to practice these things? What if they actually had, that was part of their daily instruction. Those were part of their experiences in the mathematics room where they play math, essentially real world math, and they have these exercises. And that's, again, the big focus is on these mathematical practices, which are really habits of mind. It's you approach not just the subject, because they are mathematical practices. You definitely
that in there potentially
the
is the biggest change for me, was that I had a motivation to do this where nobody else in the room did.
Yeah.
I was working my way through college, and basically while I was doing that, I was a maintenance technician or a janitor, if you will, basically at a very small manufacturing company. And I got a break with a couple of the people there. And it was to operate a very old engine lathe. And so this is a turning tool that's used to, you turn the material and then you cut away a little bit of the material, kind of like you would see in a wood lathe. It makes the spindles or banisters, along the stairwells. And I was being rewarded for being able to create a component on this machine. But I was fed with a print. So if I made a mistake, I was not rewarded. If I did it correctly, I was rewarded based in compensation, right? So I was paid to do a job, and if I did it well, then it reflected good on me. So it was in my interest to make sure that I could translate between paper and reality and back again. And actually, my next break at that company was to translate ideas onto paper. And so I was motivated by real life compensation, if you will, to get good at that, to practice that, where other people weren't motivated to do that. They're like, why am I doing this? I'm just copying lines on a piece of paper.
Right.
It doesn't have the same impact. I wish I had something more like what you're offering, Joe. I think I would have been a lot more motivated to have started that stuff earlier.
Well, and I'm wondering if we are actually replicating a little bit of that compensation, reward-based motivation, in the sense that we are at least attempting to grade based on a student's growth in the practices. So while some of it is pretty cut and dry, you've either gotten there or you haven't, we are trying to keep everyone motivated, and recognizing that our students come in at all very different levels. We are trying to do growth-based models with some of our grading components to show that if you started at a certain level, how far did you go? And that's a very, very personal, individualized statement. How far did you go? Where did you start, and where did you end up? And that's, while we might be looking for similar growth rates or growth, not growth rates, but growth amounts, maybe we're not looking for a universal, the same universal growth across the board, because that wouldn't necessarily be honoring the individual student. But coupling that with having these authentic experiences to build these habits of mind so far has produced some very good results. And of course, we're never satisfied, so we're always trying to figure out how we can improve and how we can make these experiences more authentic and keep gearing more of our instruction toward this as well. I wanted to also talk about the third thing that I heard you mention were those specification documents, and how you really have to understand everything that's on that paper, and how you're really trying to pack a lot of information into the fewest amount of words for the sake of efficiency. And immediately my mind is going to close reading. And this is a strategy that Dr. Lapp, Dr. Fisher, and Dr. Fry are very well known for, and it's something that I've had the benefit of learning directly from them, some of their strategies with it, and applying it to the math room, which is, at first, some people might be thinking, well, what are you close reading in a math classroom? Is it just word problems? And well, yes, it is word problems in some sense, but that's the very light close reading. We're also, however, doing a lot of close reading with maybe some articles trying to extract the math out of it. And those spec docs, that's very interesting to me, because it sounds like those are the exact strategies that we're working on, where we have students with whatever annotation method they prefer. By the time they get to me in the 11th grade, they're taking ownership of their own annotation techniques. But the point of annotating is to be able to call out language that signifies a lot more than just a single word. What is that? Why did the author choose this word, and what's implied by the use of this word? What can we derive from this? So what's implied, and what more is there? So for example, I recorded a video recently doing a close read with a group of middle school students, because it starts early, and we keep going with it. We just increase the intensity of the document or the text that we're reading. And with these middle school students, it was a two-sentence word problem, and part of it was the word square was in there. It was asking about the area of a square, and you were given a perimeter. And they immediately highlighted the word square, and from that, they started to extrapolate what does the word square imply? What is a square? Now, you start with, it's a shape. Okay, well, specifically, what kind of shape? 4 sides, They're all equal. We're talking about right angles. And so there's just so much information packed into that one single word. And of course, that's a simple middle school example. But the ability to recognize that and to figure out all the inferences from a single word or from a single passage or a single line of text, that's something that we're trying to provide a lot of opportunities for them to do.
Joe, could you, it sounds like you're talking about, that you're talking about close reading and something that maybe is expected where Cal works. And it sounds like you gave us a really powerful example of close reading with a group of middle school students you were just working with. What might be a difference between close reading, like in the example you just gave, and maybe not, and just reading it without attending to close reading?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, sometimes I find close reading is really the only way for certain students to begin to access what certain problems are even asking of them, or what a text even means. I went to a meeting recently where we were looking at some percentages of students who were getting certain types of problems wrong. And when we got to certain word problems, it was just so stark. A lot of students they are able to do, when you get rid of the words and you just show the actual mathematics that's occurring, they're getting that right. But then when you add in context, when you add in the application side of it, suddenly they weren't able, it's not that they weren't able to do the mathematics, because they proved on prior problems that they were able to do the mathematics. It's that they weren't able to find the mathematics. They didn't know where it was in the text. So it's the difference with reading and close reading is understanding. It's reading for understanding. It's making sure that you are really attending to precision. And that's one of our mathematical practices. And it doesn't mean just checking your negatives and positives and 2 + 2 isn't 5, it's 4. It's not just that. It is that. It's computational or procedural fluency, but it's also, there's a strong language component, and it's about attending to the precision in the written word. Why did this author choose the word square? What are we talking about with a square? How is that different than just any old rectangle? How is that different than other shapes? So I would say absolutely the difference between close reading and regular reading is reading for understanding. And some of us, I think, if we didn't learn close reading strategies explicitly, I think we kind of figured them out. And we started to do our own version of it. We read for understanding with whatever worked. But I don't think that's fair to assume that students are going to just automatically develop it. Some of us did, some of us can, some of them will. But if we're explicitly teaching strategies, they're going to have so much more access to not just every type of test problem, but more importantly to developing the skills on a much higher level that Cal's talking about, to where they can see a blueprint, which is a conglomeration of words and lines and numbers and a bunch of stuff, and actually make sense of it and have it not just be some alien printout to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think within my world, the direct impact on your ability to comprehend the translation of an idea is cost. So, for instance, a person that is designing a component, they're creating a theoretically perfect idea of something, and they're trying to translate that onto a piece of paper. When they say this thing is 1 inch long, instead of saying this is 1.0 or 1.000 inches long, each additional zero equates to a certain amount of precision that is required. And you can take this from somebody that has a handsaw in their garage to requiring an extremely precise machine in a machine shop to be able to create that component. And if you got to pay a guy in the garage to cut it off with a handsaw versus paying an extremely expensive machine shop to make that cut, the price is directly proportional to the job at hand.
Right.
And the engineer or designer is the one that's basically saying what level of precision is actually required. If you can get away with the guy in the garage and the handsaw, absolutely. Because it's going to be the least amount of money spent.
Right. So the fourth thing that I heard you mention was standardization. we were talking about, and I think it was actually along the lines of saving money, you know, and being able to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. And immediately what came to my mind, again, in line with this Attend to Precision mathematical practice, is our work that we're doing around building a student's academic register. We call out academic language daily. And it's very purposeful. It's not just so that, you know, we're making sure to touch on all the jargon that's around and to sound intellectual. No, the point is that we're all trying to speak the same language. So if I start to talk about, well, we can keep going back to the example of square, or, you know, if I start to talk about a radical expression, if this is called out in a text, if this is something that can be communicated efficiently, when I say radical expression, then if we all call it that, then we can all very efficiently communicate this thinking. So we very purposefully and intentionally call out academic language on a daily basis. We have a word wall in a math room, believe it or not. We have a word wall where we have not just our daily academic vocab, but then it has an infinite place up on the board where we, or on the wall rather, where we attach it and constantly refer back to, because mathematics is a very progressive subject. It builds on itself throughout, so it's not like you're never going to hear about a term. We start, a great example, we start the year with the word, or with the concept of functions. What is a function? And that is addressed throughout the entire year. The rest of the year is literally just playing with different types of functions from there. So you better not forget what a function is. And when I communicate the word function, you need to have an understanding of what I'm speaking. So, and then in order to build those, in order to build those academic registers, we don't just place an emphasis on it, but then we give them opportunities to use them. So we do a lot of work in collaborative settings. Our tables are all arranged in a way to where you don't have a choice, but you look up and you're seeing at least two different human beings in front of you. A lot of group work where there's group accountability as well as individual accountability. But what's important about it is that they have an authentic opportunity to use this language in a safe environment where it's okay if they're building it. If they mess it up, if they're not quite understanding it, well, there's somebody else, in fact, lots of other people who are learning it alongside them. So if they're trying to figure out, okay, wait, so what exactly is a function and how is this different than just any old expression, or excuse me, any old equation, then how are they different? They have somebody who's also building it who maybe has a little bit more insight than just that, just the teacher. So maybe they have another way to build that rather than having just that student-teacher relationship. So again, an authentic experience where they can build this academic language and use it. And that would be
touch on the point of group activity there.
Yeah.
In business, everything is a group activity, right? So you have a couple of things at play. First, you can't necessarily just dictate law, right? So you need to get agreement. Once you have agreement with a group, you're going to be a lot more successful overall. And so your ability to use the right words at the right times to express your idea in the way you intended to express it will make you more powerful at being able to direct process or procedure. Second thing is that there's no such thing as a right answer in business, right? It's our ultimate goal to do the most good at any time, right? We're traveling into uncharted territory all day, every day. There has never been anything like what we've done before. And the same thing is said in almost every environment, right? That's the biggest difference between, I think, possibly moving from a structured environment, a traditional learning experience environment, or at least my schooling was in this way, where it was like, add 2 + 2. Okay, well, we know you were right because 2 + 2 = 4.
right.
But in business, it's like, how do I get the most widgets out of this machine today, right? It's like, well, we can try this, that, and the other thing. We kind of think that using a different type of oil lubricant is going to speed things up. We don't really know for sure. We expect to see a 3% gain. Well, you got to go and do it, and then you actually get to see how you performed against your expectation. The beautiful part, though, is that in a group environment, you have the ability to get a lot of different ideas really fast. And if you're successful at gaining buy-in, then you're working as a team. And there is no 2 + 2 + 4. It's just like 2 plus a radical number, or two radical numbers that can't be mathematically calculated. They have variables that are unspoken for.
Sure.
You just have to make your best guess at what you think.
Sure.
What's your level feeling? And so somebody that drops in there that only knows how to do the math, they're like, well, I cannot answer this question because I don't have all the variables. Well, you need somebody that's going to be able to get in there from a gut level feeling, and make their best guess at that. Think their way through, base it off of the things they already know, like you were explaining earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You already know how to solve this problem. You know how to solve this problem because you were capable of solving all these other problems before.
Right.
So let's think our way through this.
Right.
What do we already know? And what do we already know that can help us solve this particular problem? Let's evaluate what really is an unknown variable, and let's just make our best guess together as a team.
Right. And you're making me think, Cal, about our last conversation when I mentioned to you how another thing that we do is we place a large emphasis on not trying to be right, but trying to be in the right. And the difference, again, is mobility. It's that willingness to negotiate your own position and detach yourself from your position so that you can look for what is ultimately the most correct position. And that's very hard to do if we just get stuck in procedural problems like 2 + 2 = 4, because, well, 2 + 2 does equal 4. But what about an authentic experience, like you said, where you're trying to figure out the fastest way to make this machine operate or the most efficient way to make this business model run? So, having those more authentic experiences for students kind of gives them a real sandbox to start to explore what does it mean to be in the right versus just trying to be inherently right and stand up for something. The other thing, I noticed that we're running low on time on this recording, so the other thing I wanted to mention, your first and what I think the most important point that you made is about those high-level thinkers, is that the one guarantee that I make to absolutely all of my students is that the point of mathematics, the universal point of mathematics, if you go into a STEM field and you actually use the mathematics daily, that's wonderful and that's great, and obviously that is a strong application of mathematics. But in my opinion, the point of mathematics is to become a smarter human being. No matter what you do, if you take the time to conceptually understand what you're doing mathematically, you're going to be better at whatever it is that you do. Because in order to gain that, you're going to have to build new neural pathways, more sophisticated neural pathways to be able to handle these procedures and these computations, or more importantly, this thinking about which procedures to use and why. So that's one major claim that I make to my students about why we're doing all this math. It's going to make you a smarter human being, and you'll be better for it.
And given that we're almost out of time, I'd like to sincerely thank both of you for those beautiful and powerful insights. And it seems to me you were talking about a lot of ideas that pertain to language use, communication, thinking together in teams, solving your way into and out of circumstances, building academic registers, and efficiently and effectively communicating. So it sounds in this conversation that there's been a lot of literacy that you're both talking about with respect to how to do math and how to do math in the real world in meaningful ways. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
I guess we're going to run out in a minute, but it has been an incredible privilege to talk with you two. So thank you very much for this.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Cindy.
Okay, talk to you. See you hopefully sometime in the future. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.